Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower to meet with Holly. He came to get her back and to be her man, but Hans and his buddies fucked up the plan, and that's about when everything went sour at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass. We're gonna die hard.
A New York City police officer must save his estranged wife and her co-workers taken hostage by terrorists during a Christmas party at the Nakatomi Plaza in Los Angeles. We're back. Podzilla 1985 is back on the air. They tried to take us off. They said we were in New York when some CEO was shot. We were not. That was not us. We were
not there.
That was the most generic, stereotypical Italian you've ever met. I think his name was Parmesan Mozzarella, if I remember correctly.
Vincenzo Spaghetti, I believe.
He is in custody now, and apparently he's the new age Robin Hood, and everyone loves him, and I have thoughts on that, but you're going to have to wait till tomorrow to hear my thoughts on all that. But tonight, the theater is open once again. This is Extras and Epilogues. We are back. We apologize for our absence.
Do we?
It's been a rough week or two for most of us, Hunter especially. Of course, that's a different story for a different time. Maybe we'll get in that tomorrow. Who knows?
I'll talk a little about that tomorrow.
You gotta stay tuned. That's the plug right there. Tonight we're talking about the classic Christmas film Die Hard.
This is our first Christmas show.
This is our first show in December.
Yes, we had a whole setup. So, dear listener, we were just reminiscing before we started the show that we have missed 3 episodes of Extras and Epilogues.
Yeah.
We were supposed to bring you an episode about Major Payne to close out November. That was Cody's pick for Nostalgic November. Yeah. We've all watched the film. We did not have time to go over it.
We are going to talk about it a little bit here in a second, though.
Yes. And then last week, we missed both the first Christmas movie and the first very cagey Christmas movie. So we're reorganizing some things. Those are going to happen later in the month. You'll get some extras and epilogues later in the month. They're all coming down the pipeline. That'd be Raising Arizona, the first Nick Cage movie, and A Christmas Story, which is how we were going to kick off Christmas. Instead, we're going with an unconventional choice, which was going to be our second week. But you know what? It's Christmas.
Yeah.
It's a Christmas movie. There it is. Let's solve the debate early on. This is a fucking Christmas movie, right?
Well, okay, I guess if this is a Christmas movie, so is Gremlins then, right?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Just because I didn't love Gremlins doesn't mean I don't think it's a Christmas movie.
I loved Gremlins, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. I'll tell you really quick before we do get to Major Payne, just very briefly. I watched a film last night, and I considered it a Christmas film, and I think it's widely considered a Christmas film. I watched Batman Returns. It takes place during Christmas. Christmas is a big part of it.
Yes, agreed.
I think we talked on the show once about. I think it was when we had Dalton on and we were talking about Batman and Robin. And if not, I'll just a little rewind real quick. The first Batman film that came out in 1989, I believe, it was pretty revolutionary. There had been superhero films before that. Superman was out there with Christopher Reeve and it was popular, but Batman in 89 really kind of set the bar, right? It was the thing. It was the one everyone loved. It was the one that everyone was like, wow, comic book movies can be incredible. Well, when Batman Returns was announced, the studio and all of the sponsors and associates were so hyped for this film. They had toys ready. McDonald's had a full thing ready for this. Yeah. They were going to release all this stuff. And everybody thought this was going to be kind of a kid-friendly Batman film. And we're going to sell a shit ton of toys, et cetera, et cetera. Then the movie came out. And I rewatched it last night for the first time in probably 10 to 15 years, right? It's still a great movie. I absolutely adore Batman Returns. And it is one of the bleakest films I think I have ever watched. And I thought, no kidding, everyone got pissed at this movie. The movie was so dark. That's the reason Batman Forever was so goofy. Because,
they had to swing it back.
The studio put so much pressure on the people to create a film that would appeal to kids, and even more so in Batman and Robin. Joel Schumacher famously, talked about it. I always remembered Batman Forever or Batman Returns being fine. Like, oh, it's fine as a kid's movie. I don't understand what the hype was about. And when I rewatched it last night, I seriously went, oh my God. From Michelle Pfeiffer's character in general, Catwoman, to, Penguin being a tragic character who dies in the end very horrifically and then is given a penguin death march to an icy grave, and the movie ending just on this sad note with the snow falling. I was like, oh my God, this is such a bleak film. I forgot how bleak Batman Returns is. No wonder everyone got pissed at this movie. Kids apparently left the theaters crying at this movie. God.
Yeah, it was it's been a very long time since I've seen it too, but I vaguely remember watching it as a kid and being like, I'm just Frank sitting there looking at it ironically with Danny DeVito and going, that ain't funny.
It's not.
What's happening?
It's not funny. It's not kid friendly. The part where Michelle Pfeiffer, I don't know if we'll ever review the film, so I want to just mention it just for a second.
Sure.
The part where Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman is walking towards Shrek, I know, played by Christopher Walken, and he just keeps shooting her. And when she gets to 6'7", and she very out of her mind sings, 6'7", all good girls go to heaven. It's disturbing. And then she kisses him with a stun gun while holding an electric cable, and when Batman finds his corpse, he's just a burnt, smoking corpse with big bug eyes sticking out. And I was like, holy fucking shit. You tried to sell this to children?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. It was when Tim Burton kind of went off the deep end, man.
I loved it.
Very early.
I loved it. I love the first Batman movie, but I think Batman Returns to me might be the best Batman film I've ever seen. It's not the best in the sense that it pays really great tribute to the character, obviously, because he straight up murders people in this. He kicks a dude down with dynamite attached to him and laughs about it.
Yes.
But just visually, I forgot how stunning this movie was. Sorry, I don't mean to talk about Batman Returns. We're not talking about that tonight. We do want to touch on Major Payne just really quick. We didn't get a chance to review it before, but I enjoyed the film so much when I rewatched it. I don't want to not talk about it. So really quick, we're going to give our reviews of Major Payne, and then we're going to move on to Die Hard. I will go first, of course. And Major Payne, I watched this when I was a kid, and I remember thinking it was kind of funny and generally liking it. But when we decided to rewatch it for this show and with Cody with Nostalgic November, I was just assuming I was going to dislike it, much like Ninja Turtles 2, which I famously disliked. Well, damn surprising thing happened. I actually really enjoyed the film when I watched it again. It's not high art. It's not.
But it is high comedy.
High comedy. Well, Hunter, it's never going to be the darling of the city fathers who cluck their tongues and stroke their beards. But it is
what's to be done about this
Major
Payne?
It's a genuinely funny film in a lot of ways. It's charming. Yeah. There was only one or two parts I cringed at. For the most part, though, I thought it was really good. I thought Damon Wayans did a great job. I thought everyone did a great job. It was really, really fun. And my favorite part of the film, for the record, we talked about it, is when he's daydreaming about his existence with the girl and the kid, and they're at a barbecue at their house with the picket fence, and a Chinese or Vietnamese soldier sneaks up on him and tries to kill him. That is just goddamn hilarious. That is so funny. So I am giving officially, if you were on the fence going, well, we got to wait to hear what Hunter and Shannon think before we decide if we're going to watch Major Payne. It's getting one thumb up from me. Again, it's not perfect. It's not high comedy, but it is a fun time. You will watch it and you will chuckle and go, that was pretty fun. And I really liked it. One thumb up from me.
Yeah, I'm going to give it the exact same. Now, interestingly, this is a movie I had never seen.
Right.
I had no idea what I was getting myself into other than what you guys had told me. When Cody suggested it, he immediately said, it's not a good movie. And I was like, oh, okay, well, there's that. Because, Dalton was coming on that week also to talk about Batman and Robin. And I knew that wasn't a good movie.
Not a good movie.
Dalton immediately apologized and said, I'm so sorry we're doing this. So I didn't really know. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. My wife and I watched it together. In the first 5 minutes, she asked me, what is this accent, this voice that he's doing? Because it was driving her
I'm gonna
insane.
make you boys strong.
But the longer that we watched it, the more we got into it. And I mean, it's very formulaic. It is very paint by numbers. There's not any surprises in this movie. If you've ever watched a sitcom or any comedy from the 90s, you're going to be able to pick out every turn that's going to happen. You're going to know the surprises. You're going to know how it's going to end before it ends, etc. All of that said, it's funny. It's funny. I mean, sometimes despite itself, it's funny. And it does some stuff with a formulaic concept that still leaves you laughing, still leaves you having a good time. Again, is it great? No. But is it bad? Also, no. And I wouldn't even call it down the middle because, again, there were things I liked and there were things I didn't. Generally, it was just things I liked. I just didn't think it excelled at anything in particular. So, yeah, it's a thumb up for me. It's a movie that I would legitimately watch again. I'm not going to seek it out probably, but if it was on, I wouldn't be upset.
Same. Yeah, if it's on in the background, if I pop it on, I would be like, oh, yeah, let's put this on. This is fun. Let's watch it.
Exactly.
So, Cody, you were wrong. We actually both ended up really liking Major Payne. So,
now I want to know what he thought about it. And hopefully when we have him in, he's going to be coming in with us to do a Christmas Story, as I mentioned earlier, when we get that back on the calendar. So we're going to talk to him about it then, make sure he gives his thoughts then.
Dalton, though, we know exactly how we were going to feel about Batman and Robin, and we were correct. Yeah. So
that is right. Nothing changed there. No surprises.
No surprises there. Okay. But we're not talking about that tonight. So tonight we're talking about Die Hard, which is one of those films that I just assumed everyone loved and cherished because I loved it as a kid. I didn't know if I was going to love it as much rewatching it today because it is an action film, and generally I really gear myself towards horror films. That's my forte. It's not that I don't like other films, but I don't get as excited about other films as I do when it comes to horror. But I watched it. I admittedly I did miss about 30 minutes of it because we were busy, and I finished it at home. But I caught all the important things. I think the sound wasn't on, but I think I got the gist of it, of what was happening. So, released July 15th, 1988. I was 6 years old when this film came out, which makes me feel old and probably makes other people listening feel young. I don't care.
Yeah, I was 3. So I was not on the radar for this.
No, I don't think this was it. Well, technically, I should have been on the radar for this either. If you
That's true.
But again, I watched Showgirls when I was a teenager, so what are you gonna do? Directed by John McTiernan, who also did Predator, which is another fantastic film. The Hunt for Red October, which is also a fantastic film, and Last Action Hero, which definitely had Bridget Wilson in it. And I had a big crush on her.
I've never seen Last Action Hero, and I've heard a lot of mixed reviews because there are a lot of people that will tell you it's way better than anyone gives it credit for because it was such a bomb, and there are others who will turn right around and go, no, it earned every bit of that bomb status. It feels like a very polarizing movie.
Schwarzenegger in that film is great. He is great in that film. Sure. He's great in most films.
The book that I've referenced here a couple of times, and I'll look up the author in a minute, but it's called The Last Action Heroes, the one about Schwarzenegger and Stallone and Bruce Willis. Die Hard is mentioned in this book. It's basically all the action heroes of the 80s and how they kind of got by. And Schwarzenegger really wanted to make that movie, which I think is why he's so good in it. He really believed in the concept. He really thought it was a good idea. And it was the studio that kind of failed him on it. The script isn't great either, but the studio didn't believe in it as what it was, which is a very satirical kind of movie. It's got a lot of pastiche kind of elements, like we're kind of making fun of this stuff. And they didn't want Schwarzenegger to elevate himself beyond what he was doing. They wanted an action comedy. And so they sold it as an action comedy. And my understanding is it's not that. Like if you go in watching it as just an action movie, it's not very good.
No.
Right. You have to understand film. And it's kind of it's a parody without being like a parody film. It's a self-aware parody.
Yeah, it's the part where the cartoon cat comes in, played by Danny DeVito, by the way, and he's a cop. And the kid's like, a cartoon cat just walked in here, and Schwarzenegger character says, yeah, and hopefully he walks in tomorrow. You know, it says he's one of the best cops they have. There's also a great bit in that film where F. Murray Abraham plays Schwarzenegger's character's like mentor. He's a cop to her agent or whatever. And the first time the kid meets him, he says, "Careful, he killed Salieri." And later he goes, "The kid said you killed Salieri." And he goes, "Who? I've killed a lot of people. I don't know that." Referencing Amadeus, which I thought was pretty funny. That kid would have watched Amadeus. Bullshit. Bullshit.
It's Nick DeSemlian, by the way. I always want to give him credit there. Nick also wrote Wild and Crazy Guys, which was all about the up-and-coming casts from SNL and a lot of the comedies in the 80s. And so then, The Last Action Heroes is his action movie one. I really hope he's going to keep doing these because he's a film journalist, and the way he structures these books is really, really interesting.
I hope we can review the SNL movie. What is it called? I've already forgotten because I've been drinking.
Saturday Night.
It's
called Saturday Night, which I also have not seen, but I really, really want to. I have a feeling it would have been in my top movies of the year had I gotten to see it yet. So
I agree. I think it looks fantastic. But again, we're talking about Die Hard tonight, written by Jeb Stewart, who also wrote The Fugitive, which was a good movie. Yes. I like The Fugitive quite a bit.
Yeah.
And Steven D'Souza, who also wrote 48 Hours and Commando, both also good films. 48 Hours more so than Commando, but I did enjoy Commando. Starring the great Bruce Willis, who, boy, we don't have enough time to talk about Bruce Willis.
No, I think the most interesting thing about him when it's related to just this movie is that he was not an action star. I don't think a lot of people know that.
He was in Moonlighting.
This is the movie that made him that. He was a sitcom star in a show called Moonlighting, and that was it.
Yep.
That was it. When he was cast in this movie, the producers were like, "Are you fucking serious? You want that guy?" He was one of those really early, I think for our generation, that was Heath Ledger as the Joker. Yeah. Right? When they cast Heath Ledger as the Joker, everyone went, "You got to be kidding."
Or Keaton as Batman.
Yeah, that too. But that was around this time, around the same time where you were starting to see more comedic actors taking on these kinds of roles, and it worked.
Yeah,
and more and more, it was perfect. I can't picture anybody else in this role as John McClane. It just wouldn't work.
I'm not the biggest fan of Bruce Willis, famously. I don't dislike him. I've heard his on-set attitude leaves a lot to be desired. Kevin Smith talked about that with what was that movie called? It was really called Dicks. Cop Out.
It was called Cop Out. It was the one with him and Tracy Morgan. Now, my understanding, and I could be wrong, is that they eventually made up over that.
They did.
Bruce Willis has had some health issues over the past few years too.
Yes,
and that stuff went undiagnosed for a long time before that, and so he was contending with that on set, and of course there was no way of anyone knowing, and so
that's one of the saddest stories to me of the past. And when it comes to Hollywood and acting, is the mental decline of Bruce Willis, and it's extremely sad, but. Because, there was a time people were saying, why is Bruce Willis making all these terrible films? And I agreed with them. I would go to Walmart and Best Buy back when they carried films, and they would have, 10 new Bruce Willis films I'd never heard of.
Right.
And it was like, why? And it turns out it's because he knew he was slipping and he was making as much money as possible so he could help pay for this and his family would be burdened, which got fucking good on you. All I know is, and this is all we'll say about it, because we don't know Bruce Willis personally, but from what everyone says is he's in a good place and he's loved, and that's really all that you can fucking hope for,
Hell yeah.
But also starring the late great, and Bruce Willis, I can't think of many other films other than Die Hard I ever saw him in, other than like Fifth Element. That's a great one.
This is going to be a little controversial. I don't know why I have a soft spot for it. So he's fucking incredible in Fifth Element. Yes. That's just a great movie. Anyway.
Corbin Dallas, Multipass,
The Whole Nine Yards.
Oh yeah,
which he did with
Amanda Peet and Matthew Perry. Yeah,
yeah, Amanda Peet and Matthew Perry. I really thought that was a good movie. The sequel's not very good,
right?
But the first one is pretty freaking good. Honestly, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I really liked Red when it first came out. So that was what him, Malkovich,
Freeman, and Mirren, right?
Morgan Freeman, yeah, and Helen Mirren, yeah. I thought that was pretty good too.
Oh, she's hot. I don't care what age she is. I've been drinking. I also he cameos. One of my favorite cameos ever. Have you ever seen National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon 1?
No, I wish you would think I had because of all these National Lampoon's things that I love, but somehow I've never seen those.
It was the last good National Lampoon film, like legitimately.
Yeah.
It was before there's a great documentary I saw on YouTube, and I can't remember the name, but it was about the National Lampoon series and how they basically sold the name off after this movie, and everyone started making these terrible National Lampoon movies, and they had nothing to do really with the organization.
Right.
But in National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon 1, there's a part where the bad guys go and they blow up this house and they tear it apart. It's destroyed because they think Emilio Estevez's character is there. And then Bruce Willis crawls out as John McClane, and he's waving a white flag, and he's like, what are you doing? And they ask, isn't this, address? He goes, no, that's like 2 over. And they're like, oh, sorry about that. And he just goes, no problem. That's his whole cameo, and it's hilarious. It's great.
That's pretty great.
Anyway.
I sure forgot he was in Pulp Fiction. I didn't even think about Pulp Fiction for a minute there.
Yeah, he's great in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. Well, it's such an ensemble cast, I don't really think of it. But.
I was just thinking about that movie the other day, specifically his part and how he goes from like generally being concerned about the other boxer who he kills in the ring to by the end going, it's his fault for being there, And he also kills John Travolta.
He's so good in Sin City. I often forget how much I loved Sin City when I was in college. He's so good. Now, Sin City is the epitome of like, do not cut yourself on the edge. But man, he's very, very good in that.
And it's also a really good movie. I'll tell you one, we're getting off topic, but I just got to say it because if no one else is going to say it, I'm going to. It's a movie I really enjoyed that apparently no one liked that's very Sin City-like, The Spirit. I don't know why it got such a bad rap. I genuinely enjoyed it. I thought it was good.
That's who was in that?
Sam Jackson.
Right, I know that.
Scarlett Johansson, which is Ava Mendez, and I can never remember who plays the main guy. Let me see. I want to say Armie Hammer, but that was Lone Ranger.
Yeah, but it might be him too, I think.
No, Gabriel Macht. Gabriel Macht.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
All right. By the way, Sam Jackson plays a character called Octopus who hates eggs.
Yes.
And Scarlett Johansson plays Silken Floss. I'm sorry. That's fantastic. All right, back to this movie. My apologies. Also starring the late, great Alan Rickman, who is just an amazing actor. He's great in this. He's great in general. Bonnie Bedelia.
Also, basically his early role, right? Yeah. If not his first, it was one of his first. So Alan Rickman was a big stage actor and was not particularly interested in doing films in general, but especially not being stereotyped and typecast as a foreign villain.
Yeah.
And then he was so good in this, that's all anybody wanted him to do.
Yeah.
Fortunately, he wasn't like constantly the foreign villain. He was just the guy they looked to for, serious kind of deadpan takes on stuff.
Sure. He was big in, he was huge in Jay and Silent Bob. Dogma. He was big in Dogma. Yeah. I can't think of
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. That was the joke. That was the joke. That's where I was getting to. You got me. I was gonna name all the films I could think of and go, I don't remember what else he was known for.
Hitchhiker's Guide. And,
which, by the way, so there's an HBO series coming out for Harry Potter, and they're talking about casting a black actor as Severus Snape, and the internet is, well, you can imagine what the internet is.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Great actor, the guy that got playing him, I guess. He's a British actor. I don't know him. I don't know many British actors. I like my humor American. I like Joe Dirt and Johnny Bananas,
Johnny Bananas. That's John. I think you mean Johnny Chimpo,
Johnny
right? From
Chimpo.
Super Troopers.
That's the one.
John Chimpo. We got to wrangle him up, and Jerry Giraffe, and Artie the Alligator.
I like that movie so much more than Hot Rod. Bonnie Bedelia is also in this. And Reginald Bell Johnson, of course, who played the same character in every movie back in the 80s.
That was Carl on duty.
Yep,
he was on duty all the time.
He was also in Ghostbusters as the same character, probably.
Yep.
Which also starred William Atherton, who's also in this film.
Right. Okay, that was probably the one that surprised me. So I haven't watched this movie in a couple of years. I've seen it several times, but it's been a little while. Full on forgot William Atherton was in this movie. Yep. Just completely forgot he was in it. And as soon as he goes to interview the kids, I was like, is this guy a dick in everything he's in?
Yeah.
In every single movie? He's never not an asshole, right?
Some people just have that face, He's
got to look. He's got to look, whether he has a beard or not. He's got to look.
And Paul Gleason was also in the film. But
that's true.
Runtime of 132 minutes. It's long for an action movie, but it works. I think it works pretty well.
It needs a lot of setup.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you kind of have to get into the rhythm of these guys aren't actually terrorists. They're there for the money. They're playing these guys against each other. We need to see John McClane as a human being. So that's one of the big changes, right? This was based on a book, which was part of a series.
Which I did not know until I read that in
here.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, so that's part of that was part of the thing is that Frank Sinatra had played this John McClane character, although he wasn't called John McClane, in a previous film that was based on the same series. Yes. And he had first right of refusal on this character. They had to come to this, like, I think at the time,
they had to go to Frank Sinatra and ask him?
go, hey, yeah, when he was like 70, they're like, hey, do you want to star in this movie? And he just, I assume, threw a martini at them. I don't know. But he didn't, obviously. But yeah, so in this series, and I think it's John McTiernan who really did a lot of the changing here, though it might have been the writers who had some say in this too. The cop is very much a super cop. So like what what John McClane becomes later in the Die Hard movies, like 3, 4 down the line, where he's basically superhuman.
Yeah.
That's what that guy was. Like, he never makes a mistake. He's perfect at everything. And they were just terrorists. They just wanted to be terrorists and terrorize people and blow up a building. And they said, no one's going to get invested in this.
Right.
So they made John McClane much more human, much more likable,
call.
likable in general. But yeah. And they made the terrorists thieves who were using terrorism as a guise for getting away with what they wanted to. Completely changes the movie. And
for the best. Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of my favorite lines at the end when he's taking the money and John McClane's wife, Bonnie Bedelia, says, "You're just a thief." And Alan Rickman's like, "I'm a very good thief."
Yes.
It's a great part.
It's got a purpose.
Have you ever seen Die Hard with a Vengeance?
Yes.
Where Jeremy Irons plays the brother of Gruber in this film, which is a little odd, but it's fine. I love Jeremy Irons too.
It's fine.
Budget versus box office, $35 million versus $141 million. This is a bona fide hit. This is one of the all-time classics when it comes to action films. Much like Gremlins with comedy, this is it's a classic.
That's also just theatrical take, and I assume it's from the initial run. I don't know if this has really been re-released a lot, but this is one of the movies that turned video stores into a huge breakout hit, right? This was, you couldn't keep this cassette on the shelves.
Yeah.
It's something that ran on TV a lot. That's where we get the common joke of the yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon. But yeah, so this movie is much more pervasive than just the 141 it made at the box office.
I don't know many people that don't know Die Hard, you know?
Right. Even if you've never seen it, if I say Die Hard, you know what we're talking about because it's such a ridiculous phrase.
Right.
It's Die Hard.
It's much like the film Gremlins, where if you mention it, people are going to know what you're talking about, even if they've never seen the film.
Is this what we're doing tonight?
I think they're very similar to each other. You know? I'm joking, but I'm also kind of serious because both of these films are kind of adult takes on semi-Christmas tales, and the debate has always raged forever. Whether you like either film or not, they do have similar genes. The debate has raged forever. Are either of them Christmas movies? They're both Christmas movies. They both are, and they're both good. Not to spoil my review, but I genuinely enjoy both films. Damn it, I spoiled my review. All right. Yes, the Die Hard music video. You showed me this. You were the first person to show me this.
So I dropped it in there because I just was going to throw in there later. That's obviously going to be part of the intro for this show, right? We got to at least include the first.
It's the music now.
It's got to be the first part. The first verse is just about this movie. So
normally we have our own music that we paid a musician to do.
and you can mix them, do whatever you got to do. But you got to include something in there for sure.
I'm tipsy, so I'll just use it as the intro. Critical reception, 94% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Again, this is a beloved film. This is an absolutely beloved film, much like Gremlins.
Yes.
72 out of 100 on Metacritic. I'll stop it now. That's my last one, I promise. 72 out of 100 on Metacritic. That's generally favorable. Cinema score of A+ on an A to F scale.
So that's your audiences, by the way. As a quick reminder, I always want to throw that out there. Cinema score is strictly audiences. That's the one where you're usually going to get a more accurate look at popcorn movies, which is what this is. Right. And again, A+. It's literally, as far as audiences are concerned, as good as it gets. Metacritic is the opposite. It's exclusively critics. And 72 is not terribly surprising for what is effectively exclusively an action movie, right? Rotten Tomatoes runs down the middle. That's why I went with the I try to give you all three of them because Rotten Tomatoes includes critics and then also like internet critics, which is us basically. We could have a thing on there. Why don't we have a thing on there?
We should have a thing on there. We should have a thing on there. We've done enough reviews at this point. I think so.
Right.
A little surprise from Roger Ebert. I didn't know this. He gave it 2 out of 4 stars and said, without the deputy chief, which is played by Paul Gleason, and all that he represents, this would have been a more than passable thriller. With him, it's a mess, and that's a shame because the film does contain superior special effects, impressive stunt work, and good performances. I did not think Paul Gleason was that distracting.
So I'm pulling it up right now, but he had a lot more to say about it than that. I gave that the poll clip right there was the most important part. But he was very upset about that role. He says, the filmmakers introduce a gratuitous and unnecessary additional character, the deputy police chief played by Paul Gleason, who doubts the guy on the other end of the radio is really a New York cop at all. As nearly as I can tell, the deputy chief is in the movie for only one purpose, to be consistently wrong at every step of the way and to provide a phony counterpoint to Willis's progress.
That's true.
The character is so willfully useless, so dumb, and so much a product of the idiot plot syndrome that all by himself he successfully undermines the last half of the movie.
Okay.
He says thrillers like this need to be well-oiled machines with not a single wasted moment. Inappropriate and wrong-headed interruptions reveal the fragile nature of the plot and prevent it from working.
Okay, 2 things. 1, I don't entirely agree with them. 2, this is why I love Roger Ebert. This is why Roger Ebert was the first movie critic to win a Pulitzer Prize. That is fantastic analysis, and that's analysis that I will never be sober enough to do. I don't entirely agree with it because I didn't think that Paul Gleason was that distracting, and maybe it's because I've seen this film before and I'm not reviewing it fresh like he did, but
sure.
I didn't think he was as distracting as Roger Ebert did. But admittedly, he is kind of a useless character other than to just be there and be contrarian.
I was going to say, I don't think he's necessarily distracting so much as he is disruptive.
Sure.
I would go with the word disruptive, and I agree with that. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the idea that you have some plot contrivance in there that keeps everyone from just immediately being on this guy's side. We want McClane to be... First of all, we want to root for him, so we need somebody rooting against him other than just, the thieves, right?
Right.
But at the same time, we also want to give Bruce Willis a chance to go off on somebody. And this is the guy. He's the one who gets the brunt of the insults and the throwbacks of the, what do you think I'm doing here, asshole? Ordering a pizza? Like, there's got to be some version of that. But and I was a little poisoned by this because I had written, our notes, so I had already seen this part of the review. Having that in mind, the first time he pops into the scene, the first time that Paul Gleason's character pops in, the moment he starts undermining things, and that really is a good word for it, I immediately was like, oh yeah, this guy sucks.
Yeah.
This guy just kind of sucks. And he feels
do you ever think that maybe he's one of the terrorists?
Right. He just feels like one of the he feels like a plot device less than a character. Because again, he is consistently wrong. You know everything about him just by looking at him, by hearing the first thing out of his mouth. You really do just you want to root against him, and that's fine. I'm fine with rooting against a character in a position of authority, but at the same time it would be more productive and effective if he was, right once or twice, if he wasn't a total dick. Like
well,
he even says, Roger says at the end of his review, right, he says at the end of the review, here's a suggestion for thrill makers. You can't go wrong if all the characters in your movie are at least as intelligent as most of the characters in your audience. That's
a good point. Again, that's why to me, that's why Roger Ebert and to an extent Gene Siskel are the kings of this genre. Sure. That's why they've influenced us so much. They're that good. With that said, let's talk about the film. So we're 30 minutes in. We need to talk about the film. This is one of those movies that I'm pretty sure my dad loved. I think all dads love this film. If you were a father in the 80s, you had to legally like this film.
Absolutely.
But it's well deserved. It's well deserved, and it's such a good action film. When I think of the all-time great action films, and the ones that will always stick with me, this is near the top of the list. Especially if you talk about the '80s. The '80s to me is the best era for films. It's the best decade for films. The best horror, the best action. This is the time of the Schwarzeneggers and The Thing, and American Werewolf in London and Ghostbusters and stuff like that. The '80s were the best movies, and Die Hard is up there, man. It is up there in the list of the all-time greats.
Yes.
Not to spoil my review or anything, I just punched my microphone. I'm sorry. I'm halfway through this bottle. I apologize. The pain is extensive today. In watching this movie again, I think the part that really that surprised me is, of course, I love the action. Bruce Willis is born to be an action star. I don't think anyone's going to deny that. But I forgot the part that I really loved about this movie most, I think, was the genuine friendship that develops between his character and Reginald VelJohnson. That is such a great part of this movie. And then at the end, when they finally see each other and they hug, it's cathartic. It's just that good, you know?
Yes.
And beyond that, the action is so good in this movie. There's a high class of action star. You talked about earlier with the author that was talking about the action movie stars, because of course you have your Van Dammes, which is sure he's a good action star, and I like Jean-Claude Van Damme, and you have your Stallones, he was top tier. Your Schwarzenegger's top tier. Your Steven Seagal's very low tier, but he sold a lot of tickets, so whatever. And this movie specifically with Bruce Willis is in that top tier list. I can't think of many other action films in the 80s especially that was as good, as entertaining, as visually impressive as Die Hard.
One of the things about this movie that and I'm not giving any expert analysis here that no one has ever said before. This is nothing groundbreaking I'm going to put out there. But at the time that you're talking about, so again, that the book I mentioned goes into detail on this. You mentioned Stallone, you mentioned Schwarzenegger. The action movies that those guys are making are big and bombastic. They're extremely over the top. The body count is crazy.
And not just that, but also the huge bodies. Stallone, Schwarzenegger, the giant buff action hero. Yes. And he was different.
Most of that, that's the thing. Most of that is on the star in those movies, right? It's Rambo or it's Conan the Barbarian, the Terminator, depending on who it is in the role. It usually is some big buff bodybuilder who maybe is an actor second and those things first. You know, Stallone, give or take, because he was doing some really great acting before that.
Yeah.
But
Schwarzenegger for sure.
At the same time, it was the stuff that sold for him, right?
Yeah.
But then in this movie, it's not just that Bruce Willis is that, it's that John McClane is that. They're the exact opposites of everything we've been told up to that point. And the movie leans into that instead of making it like a problem. Oh, he's just a normal guy. He's just a whatever.
How's this nerd going to solve the issue?
Right. No one ever really says that, because he's a New York City cop. He's still extremely tough. He's extremely smart. But a lot of it is more about the latter than the former. It's about how much smarter he is and about how much more capable he is of deducing a plan, figuring it out, trying to keep people safe, trying to just consistently make a move without it having to come down to, I'm big enough that I can beat this guy to death. Sure. Every fist fight he gets into this movie takes a really long time.
Right.
And he doesn't come out the other end of it completely unscathed. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. He's messed up every time he gets to the ends of these things. He's consistently covered in blood. He's always getting hurt. Well, and like you said, we get to see him be a little bit fragile. It's not just the physicality, but it's also the times that he talks to Al on the radio and is asking him questions about, you got kids, man? What are they doing? I need you to pass me a message on to my wife. I need you to do this. You never get the sense that John McClane can't die. Right. And that's pretty impressive in a movie where you know that that he's the star, and it says Die Hard in the fucking title.
Yeah.
We're not reviewing the other movies tonight, but it is the major failing of every other Die Hard movie. From this point forward, they never come back to being as good. And that's the problem with a movie like this. They don't need a sequel. You almost can't make an action movie that is successful in the 80s, especially, and not give it a sequel. But if anybody deserved to not have to go through that shit again, it was fucking John McClane.
Right, because
and then they just kept dragging him back out.
I'm glad you mentioned that. 2 points on that. One, they don't make action stars and action movies like they did back in those days. There are great action films now. Keanu Reeves basically reinvented himself as John Wick, right?
Exactly.
Even people you wouldn't expect, like Bob Odenkirk in Mr. Nobody or whatever it was called. But man, you don't make action movies like the 80s. Your Schwarzeneggers, your Stallones, your Bruce Willises. It was a different class. It was a different breed. Jason Statham is like, I think everybody's closest. Well, what about Jason Statham? He's great. But
him and oh god, Liam Neeson. Neeson were kind of doing the same thing at the same time there for a while. Yeah.
But they don't make them like in the 80s. But at the same time, the problem with that is the 80s, I think, other than what is the car movie? Fast and the Furious, which is just an idiot's film. No offense, Jesse. It's an idiot's franchise. It's easier now to find reasons for the same characters to be involved with multiple movies. Look at John Wick. I don't think there's a John Wick film where it's almost insulting to go, well, why is John Wick in this situation? Well, he's a world-class assassin. Everybody's after him. It makes sense. But at this time period, I feel like John McClane and Die Hard especially were the only ones that should not, like you said, should not have had a sequel. When you think of Terminator, it makes sense that there's multiple Terminator films because you're dealing with time travel, you're dealing with robots. Rambo was a military expert. There's a lot of room to go there with different missions and things like that. But with McClane, he's just a cop. He's just a cop that was put in a bad situation. And the fact that they went on,
that he was working, that's the worst part. That was the whole point. Now, if you'd followed up with him exclusively in New York doing something whatever, but he's still just a detective. That was the whole thing.
I've said this multiple times about different films, and not just films, but different things. Sailor Moon, for example, or of comic books, why the bad guy would always pick the same city to attack when you know there's a superhero there. Well, how many times can John McClane be put in the same situation to where, he's going to have to, fight terrorists, fight bad guys, et cetera, et cetera? It doesn't make any sense. At a point, you have to let John McClane go. I think Die Hard 2 was okay. Well, I know we're not reviewing them. Die Hard 2 was okay. I genuinely like Die Hard with a Vengeance, but I don't think it's a great film, but it was a fun film. Yeah. And then beyond that, man, I know I've seen the other ones, and I can't tell you a single thing about it because at that point I was like, how many times can the same thing happen to a cop? Yeah. Like, come on.
By the way, I looked it up because I was curious. I wanted to get it out there. So the Die Hard is loosely based on a novel called Nothing Lasts Forever by an author named Roderick Thorpe, who wrote this series of spy novels or whatever, or detective novels. The prequel, or the first, it's not a prequel because that would come after, but the first book in that series was just called The Detective. And it was made into a movie called The Detective, and that was the one that starred Frank Sinatra as Detective Joe Leland. And so then when Nothing Lasts Forever got adapted, it was the same deal, and because they weren't using him and they were changing it up, they changed his name to John McClane, and Bruce Willis stepped in and did it. Yeah, it's a little different. It's definitely got some distinct differences there, but yeah, man, the main takeaway for me from this movie is just that I don't think it gets better. Number one, for an 80s action movie in general, and I know that's a little controversial in and of itself because there's a lot of different things. We've mentioned a lot of different names and franchises, but this is the one that if I can make myself forget that a bunch of stuff comes after it that I frankly don't really care about, and it just consistently makes it worse. And if I can just lock into just this movie, especially at this time, and that's what I love about it as a Christmas time movie, which I'm going to talk about in a second, I can get lost in this movie. Even at 2 hours plus, which is, again, like you said, a little bit long for an action movie that takes a couple minutes to get going. We have to get introduced to the characters, the situation, what's going on. The action doesn't really start until a little bit later. I can get lost in this movie. Now, the other thing is, again, it's a Christmas movie.
Right.
And I know that was the big joke, I guess, for a while was, is it a Christmas movie? It was just because it takes place at Christmas and blah, 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 blah. It's a fucking Christmas movie, okay?
Yes.
A lot of what happens in this movie is central to the fact that it is Christmas time, right? Now, granted, you can make it happen otherwise, but important plot points exist. It's the same way Home Alone is a Christmas movie.
Sure.
Important plot points happen, yes, because it is Christmas time, and to me, that's what makes it a Christmas movie. I know that there are other ways of looking at that, but that's what it is. I don't really want to watch this movie outside of Christmas time. It's wild to me that it came out in the summer in a way, even though it shouldn't be, because that's when you drop your blockbusters and your big action movies.
Right.
But this is a movie that feels pretty definitively Christmas-like. There's constant references to the season.
It feels better.
It might not be. Yes, while it might not be the feel good, family event of the year or whatever,
I think it is.
It's got first of all, it's got that message, right, of reunification, of coming back together.
Of love.
We basically we literally watch Holly fall in love with her husband all over again over the course of this movie. It just happens to be that she does that watching him kill terrorists.
Yes.
/ thieves.
And
right?
if only I could have done the same thing, perhaps I could have salvaged relationships in the past. If I could have killed a couple of terrorists.
He keeps a count. He's got a body count,
I feel there's another movie when you talk about that. It's funny to hear you say that because there's another movie that I've watched that I can only watch at Christmas time, even though it's not a Christmas film. Have you ever seen the film Brotherhood of the Wolf?
I have not that I know of.
Interesting movie. Bob showed it to me, based on a true story to an extent, and it's a Christmas film. I can only watch it at Christmas because it gives those Christmas vibes, and so does Die Hard. Like, I get you could watch this film at any point in the year because it's a good action movie, but there's something special about watching it at Christmas. Like Batman Returns last night. Batman Returns is a film you can watch anytime, but it adds a little bit of an extra layer when you watch it during the Christmas period. I don't know what it is. I wish I could explain it to you, but there's just a feeling you get. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do, because that's exactly the point that I'm getting at. So for anyone who's wondering why we're kicking off this season with this movie, that's why. That wasn't the original intention, of course, but it still works. Yeah, I think it still works. And
if you don't like that, you can fuck off, honestly.
And the biggest thing for me is that the movie just, even though it is a little long, and yes, Paul Gleason's character is a little bit, why is he there? He feels a little superfluous with all the other issues that are happening.
Right.
It does a really good job of weaving all of its plot points together, all of the different things that are happening.
Agreed.
It just works.
Yes.
Once it gets going, it just works. If you have any interest in a movie like this, if you can get into an action movie, if you like a smart thriller, if you like seeing like a normal guy have to kind of go above and beyond and elevate himself a little bit, not to superhuman levels, and that's the best part about this movie compared to the others, but just to, he's got to really be put to the limit of everything he's capable of. You're going to like this. You're going to like this. If you want to watch smart villains, like despite the fact that he loses in the end, Hans Gruber makes a ton of extremely smart moves. And all the way up to the end, he's still shifting and changing his plan to make it work. That's the other part. A good villain doesn't just believe in what they're doing, but they also have a backup plan. They're not just chaotic stupid. They're
not
just doing the evil thing. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Again, you get the beginning of that with the fact that these are thieves disguised as terrorists. That's a smart move from the get-go. But then from there, we see Hans as the only one amongst his guys who's able to consistently control the rest of them and go, we stick to the plan. We stick to the plan. When the plan doesn't work, we change the plan.
Yeah.
Hans Gruber is the template for all those great smart villains you love after that. I can't think of his name, but the character that Giancarlo Esposito plays in Breaking Bad that everyone loves so much, completely modeled on Hans Gruber. He follows the same concepts.
Or, I know this is going to be a stretch, please forgive me, but in a way, like Dutch Vanderlyn from Red Dead Redemption, I got a plan.
No, it's not a stretch. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. Yes, this is a guy who is a cult of personality. This is a guy who knows that if he can get them to believe in him, then they'll do anything that he says, and that's what works.
Right, much like Spike in Gremlins.
That's what I thought you were going to say the first time when you said it was a stretch. I was like, is it going to be about the guy with his little gun, the little gremlin with the little gun? The gun fit his hand, Shannon. He had a little revolver.
I love it.
I feel like Millhouse every time this comes up. Then where did the revolver come from, Shannon?
I can't help
where
but
did he get
love
the
it.
Revolver?
I can't help but love it, and I'll never change my mind. Okay, let's get to the review.
Talking about, hang on real quick, because I haven't done any of this trivia, but we were talking about Hans Gruber and how great he is. So the scene where he and McClane start hanging out because he pretends to be American, not in the film originally, and this is a real testament to both that character and to both of those actors. When John McTiernan found out that Alan Rickman could do a not convincing, but a very good, or not just convincing, but a very good American accent. He's like, we got to use that. And they had been looking for a way to have those characters meet before the finale anyway. So that's how that scene came about. And he's so good, you believe John McClane goes, all right, this guy's not who he says he is. Like, his acting is so good, not just the accent, but the way that he cowers and cries about not wanting to die. Spot on. I mean, it's perfect.
Except for
The cigarette. That's the part. If you've never noticed it, when you're watching it the next time, notice that when McClane offers him a cigarette, Gruber takes it between his thumb and his forefinger, which is the way that a European person typically, it's a common European way of taking a cigarette or holding a cigarette if you're European, as opposed to American, which is between the index and the middle finger. So that when you see him do that, of course, you can kind of see McClane think, oh, I think I know who this guy might be. I think I know what's happening. Of course, he offers him the gun with no bullets in it. But yeah, so that's just a real testament, I think, to both the characters and the actors in that scene. And it's a great scene. It's just a great scene among many of them in this movie.
Well, another one of the trivias that you have on there, and I guess we'll save it for after the review because it is part of the ending. But I had a thought about it, and I want to share that thought. But let's get to the reviews first. Promise me something though, because I'm getting a little tipsy. You promised me you won't let me forget that I had a point to make about the ending. Okay,
I'll bring the trivia back. Yes.
All right. Let's get to the reviews. Obviously, on this show, we do a 5-point review inspired by the greats, Siskel and Ebert mostly. 2 thumbs up means you absolutely loved it. 1 up means you like it. 1 up, 1 down means you were neutral on it. 1 down means you didn't like it, and 2 down means you hated it. Now, sometimes we give films 1 thumb down or 1 up, 1 down because they're not perfect movies, but generally we recognize that they're great films, like Gremlins with Hunter. And then sometimes we give movie 2 thumbs down because they're bad. See Neil Breen, see Space Jam, see Mad God, see Dog Soldiers, which I'm really going to rewatch Dog Soldiers one of these days and see if maybe I was just having a bad day, because
you have fun with that.
I can't understand why I loved a movie so much and then hated it so much, but that's another story. Let's get to this film. Famously, only a few films have ever gotten 2 thumbs down across the board. Will Die Hard be one of them? Let's find out. The answer is no, because I'm giving this film, look, action movies aren't really my forte. Horror is my forte. We've said this before. But when I think of action films, I cannot think of an action film that is more influential, more beloved, and smarter and more entertaining than Die Hard. I want Hunter to love Gremlins so bad, but at the same time, I cannot let his views on Gremlins influence my view on Die Hard. I think Die Hard is a fantastic film. It's action-packed. It's funny. It's entertaining. Bruce Willis is just such a natural action star. There's one thing about Stallone to a lesser degree, but Schwarzenegger especially when he was starting off, is that because of his, he was foreign. I think he's from Austria, if I remember correctly. There was a language barrier, and there was, even though he's very charismatic in those early films, watch The Terminator, he barely has any lines because they knew that having him as the silent killer worked best to his strengths as a foreign actor. Well, Bruce Willis does not have that problem. Bruce Willis is such a natural, charismatic character. I can't think of a better action hero from the 80s than John McClane. There's a reason that he is so iconic and influential. This movie is everything you want it to be in an action film. It's funny, it's smart, it's action-packed, it's brutal. It's got great acting, some really standout characters. Reginald Bell Johnson is one of my all-time favorites in this movie especially. I can't, as much as I wanted to find flaws in it, just because I didn't want to be like, well, it's Die Hard, everybody loves it, I really couldn't find many flaws. Maybe it's a little too long. Maybe there are some parts that you could cut out of it. But I love the fact that this all takes place in one place in the Nakatomi Plaza. So it's centralized in one spot. You don't hop from place to place. It's very focused. It's very entertaining. You really can't go wrong with Die Hard. I don't have to tell you, the listener, that, because I'm sure you've heard how good Die Hard is. It's getting 2 thumbs up from me. I cannot give Gremlins 2 thumbs up and then not give Die Hard 2 thumbs up, because they're both amazing films for different reasons. I genuinely love Die Hard. I don't talk about it a lot, but I really love this movie. It's getting 2 thumbs up for me, Hunter.
Yeah, it's the same for me. It's getting 2 thumbs up. This is a movie that I did not see until later than I probably should have. It was, man, in the past 10 years, which I know sounds like a long time, but I'm almost 40, so I was definitely in my 30s by the time I saw this movie. I don't know what took me so long to get there, but I'm glad it wasn't any longer. This is, weirdly, I don't give a lot of movies 2 thumbs up if they're not among my favorite movies. and this is not a movie when I'm asked about my favorite movies that comes up ever in my mind. As much as I like it, I never ever go, it's Die Hard. Right. And maybe it's just because it is so well known and so well loved in so many different circles. I don't know. I can't say definitively. What I can say is that you've already said this to a certain degree, you really can't go wrong. You really cannot go wrong with this movie. It's super entertaining from top to bottom. Like you said, even if it does seem to be a little long, I think it goes by fast enough that it doesn't feel that way because you're so constantly interested and entertained in what's going on. Every character feels vital and important, even if you don't know every one of the thieves' names, for example. Every time they come up on screen after they've been there for a minute or two, you know exactly who that guy is. You know what he's capable of, what he does, and basically why he's there, even though they're all there for essentially the same reason.
To die.
The hostages. Yeah, the hostages, sort of the same way. It's so satisfying when Ellis gets himself killed, and yet at the same time, you're like, you're sitting there listening to John going, "Oh, he's right. They really should stop talking right now. He's going to die." John McClane is one of the all-time great film characters. He really is. And I know a lot of people would be very upset to hear that because it's such a popcorn movie and it's such a not a deep dive into any kind of, psyche of a character
it's
or whatever.
Not high art.
But he's a great character. This is a character who is, again, consistently learning, consistently adapting. It's what I really hate so much about what the sequels did, turning him essentially, if not literally superhuman,
right,
is that in the later movies, it feels like John McClane knows John McClane can't die. In this movie, he doesn't know that. And the other characters don't know that either, even though he consistently outlives them. There's always a thought of, here's how we're going to get him. And it usually works to some degree. That's the best part. The shoot the glass scene is always great to me. Gruber just telling him, just shoot the glass. He's going to have to run through the glass. And he does. And it sucks.
Yeah.
And there's a long time that he gets past that. And it's rough.
I wanted to mention before I forget, the parts where he's walking on the glass, even as a kid, I remember thinking, oh, fuck that. That's bad. That's painful.
Yeah. It sucks, man. And it just, that whole, this whole movie is, like you said earlier, it's a masterclass in what you can do with a very simple premise, a really tight script, and a lot of really, really good actors who are committed to those roles. Everyone is doing what they need to do in all those little individual roles. And you honestly, I think if you get away from this movie for a while, you kind of forget. Again, I straight up forgot that William Atherton was in this movie.
Sure.
You forget how many moving parts there are because they all move in the proper ways. They're all properly synced, and nothing really stands out. Again, save for, I don't disagree with Roger Ebert, the deputy chief, when you know what to look for, and you're like, yeah, why is he so bad at this?
Yeah.
It's a little frustrating, but it's not frustrating enough to bring it down.
But even he, towards the end of the film, he never becomes the straight up villain. Like he's a little inept, but even at the end, he's talking to Al and he's like, I don't like this, Sarge. It's like he's not just a stereotypical hard ass, I'm clearly the bad guy on the right side. Right. He's a flawed character. He's not perfect, but at least he doesn't hit that level. Yeah,
exactly. I've said this often, not of just movies, but of storytelling, just to kind of wrap up what I was saying earlier. If you want me to care about a movie, I have to care about all of it. I have to care about the characters. I have to care about the setting. I have to care about the plot. It's not just about the story. I have to care about who's involved in that story, where it's taking place, what I'm supposed to take away from it. And this movie nails that at every level. I care about these people. I want to know what's happening to them, whether that means I want to see them get their comeuppance or I want to see them survive, get away, and get to live a life. It's all true. It's all true across the board.
Yeah.
The setting works. I put it in the notes and we didn't talk about it yet, but Nakatomi Plaza is so iconic. And the irony is that it is literally just the headquarters of 20th Century Studios, or it was at one point in time anyway.
And it charged itself rent. That's the part that gets me.
Yeah, so literally to offset production costs, the building wasn't done yet. They were moving into it in the future, and John McTiernan stepped in and said, can we shoot there? Because they were trying to find a way to bring costs down for this movie, and they said, sure. So they had a bunch of unfinished floors, which was perfect. They could stock them with a few computers and desks and let them run around and do their own thing. And yeah, they charged themselves rent so that they could, double it back on their taxes. And it's super smart. It feels like an extension of the movie itself. They made a really smart move, a really ecumenical move that just works. And that's how this movie is at the end of the day. It just works. If they'd stopped here, it would. I think I would love it more. I think it might be among my favorites if this was the only one. But it comes with so much baggage from the others, and that's problematic. Anyway, this movie is 2 thumbs up.
I think so. I really don't remember Die Hard 2 very much. I need to rewatch it. I really don't remember it much. Die Hard 2
is bad. It's the plane. That's the plane one.
Yeah, and that's the only thing I remember is the plane.
Yeah, and I don't really remember the details either, other than it's silly. The premise is kind of goofy. It's the same thing that happened with Saw. This movie took off in a way people didn't expect. They thought it would be a hit, but they didn't think it would be this kind of hit, or they hoped it would be anyway. And so they needed a script to go with a sequel. You got to churn out a sequel. Die Hard 2 was not meant to be a Die Hard movie. It was just meant to be an action thriller that took place on a plane, and then it got retrofitted with Holly Gennaro, John McClane, and terrorists and that whole thing. And you can kind of tell. You can kind of tell when you look at the seams that it's just not. It's not as good as it should be, man. Three brings it back with Sam Jackson. Die Hard with a Vengeance is pretty good. It's still not as good as the original, but it's pretty good. And that's the last time that these movies are good.
Agreed. 100% agreed. I think if you skip Die Hard 2 and go straight to Die Hard with a Vengeance, it makes sense because it's the brother of the main bad guy of this one looking for revenge. At least it has a connection. There's a reason that John McClane would be pulled into this. I'm so tired, and I think Die Hard is the worst of them. I said it before, pulling the main character in multiple situations where you're like, well, how many times can something incredible happen to the same cop? You know?
Yeah.
So I agree with you.
Also, just as a note, and I just went to look to make sure, Die Hard and Die Hard with a Vengeance are the only 2 movies of this whole series, of which there are 5, that were both directed by John McTiernan and were both produced by John McTiernan. Different writers. I'll give them that. Steven D'Souza apparently came in from 1 onto 2 to help clean up that script that they bought. But from that point on, those guys are not involved at all, and it shows.
Boy,
it shows big time.
I didn't know John McTiernan had such a deep list of classics. There is an underrated director for sure. All right.
Yes.
With the ending, a weary and battered McClane finds Holly with Gruber and his remaining henchmen. McClane surrenders to Gruber and is about to be shot, but grabs his concealed service pistol taped to his back, which I love, by the way. They're all laughing, and then he grabs the gun. That's great. Uses his last 2 bullets to wound Gruber and kill his accomplice. Gruber crashes through a window, but grabs into Holly's wristwatch and makes a last-ditch attempt to kill the pair. McClane unclasps the watch, and Gruber falls to his death. Outside, Carl ambushes McClane and Holly, but is shot dead by Powell. Holly punches Thornburg when he attempts to interview McClane, and Argyle, God, there's so much at the end, crashes through the parking garage door in the limo and drives McClane and Holly away together as they kiss, and the movie comes to an end on Christmas. The thing I wanted to say, and I do remember I was going to say something, is, and it goes into the note, one of the notes you had, to get a genuine reaction from Rickman for his fall from the top of Nakatomi Tower, the stuntman released the rope on the count of 2, not 3, and Rickman later said during a Q&A that the stunt was purposely done on his last day on set. So, the thing I wanted to mention was, in the 80s and early 90s especially, there was this obsession with the villain, his death being him falling from yes. And it's done to different degrees of good. Like, the worst is RoboCop. We talked about it before, but that fucking claymation guy falling from the roof with his 40 feet wingspan. This movie did it really well. I think of all of them, this film did the best version of the bad guy falling to his death. Because again, to me, RoboCop is the standard for how not to do it. Even though I love it.
When you said it, it dawned on me. So, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom ends with Molaram falling off of the bridge. Of course, that one also ends with just a shot of alligators eating chicken, so that it looks like they're eating him.
Turtles in Time did that with the bad guy. He fell to his death into the water. Yeah. It's like the sky beam.
Do they do does T-1000, do they do an overhead shot of him falling in? That would have been the 90s, I guess, but
no, I don't think they did an overhead shot for him. No,
I thought he fell into the liquid metal that way. Maybe
he does fall into the liquid metal, but I don't think he does an overhead, but I'm too drunk to know for sure. But there was an obsession in that time period with that. Kind of like, again, like I said, the sky beam in films like Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters 2016. The sky beam was popular. This movie did it the best. It was the most realistic. You could see the actual fear on Alan Rickman's face as he falls. It's so much better than RoboCop. I'm sorry, I can't stop thinking about that.
And of course, they, like you said, they wait until his last day on set, so he can't do anything about it. That's right. The last thing he does. Hey, thanks for coming, Alan. You can go home now.
Yeah, thanks. Good luck being Severus Snape. And he knocked it out of the park. So that's for Tanner. All right, so epilogues. Where do you see the character going from here? Look, you said it earlier, and I don't know if you have something planned, but I'm going to say it. I agree with you. This film should have been a one and done. There needs not to be an epilogue for this. He killed the bad guys. He's a hero. I don't want to see anything else. I think this film should have stood on its own. They should have never made a sequel, even though I do like Die Hard with a Vengeance. Genuinely, I thought it was a fun movie. It's not great, but it's fun. The other two, I don't even remember. I've seen them, and I can't tell you. I know one was about his son. That's it.
I don't think I have. I don't think I've even seen them. I think after Vengeance, with a Vengeance, I haven't even seen them. So
they're so generic. They're so generic and not good. I think this film should have stayed by itself. This should have been a one-time movie, and like you said, I agree with you. It would have been it's already an all-time classic, but I think it would have the stock on it would have risen even more had they not made sequels that diluted the importance of the first film. So that's my saying, and I know it's a cop-out, but I'm not saying it because I don't have an idea. You could think of a million. It's an action film. You could think of a million different things for John McClane to do, but I think realistically, this film should have been a one-time thing. This is not Terminator. This is not Rambo. It should have been one and done. That's where I stand. What about you?
Yeah, I don't do this very often anymore. I feel like that was the original intent, and it doesn't come up very often now. But I'm not going to pitch you a sequel for this movie. I'm not going to pitch a TV series or anything like that. I don't think any of that works. Again, I understand that he's an action hero, but sometimes it's okay to be an action hero one time.
Right.
So I think the epilogue here is the realistic epilogue, which is literally what happens to these characters after this ends. So here's as they would say in Wayne's World, let's do the mega happy ending. So obviously they get back together. Holly has already said, when they say Mrs. Gennaro, Miss Gennaro, she says Mrs. McClane. So she corrects them, and
I do like
obviously
that part.
They're going to get back together. Yeah, that's pretty great. The question, of course, then is, are they going to stay in California? Are they moving back to New York? I suspect they move back to New York, not just because John wants to go there, but I think Holly has probably had enough of LA for the rest of her life, as has John at this point. Obviously, they take the kids, they go back, they do their thing, and I hope, frankly, that they live out their lives happily. That he continues being a cop, that he gets several commendations for doing what he did. He retires with full honors. He's friends with Al. Maybe he gets Al a job out in New York. Maybe he gets him over on the East Coast. Simply because he disobeyed a shit ton of orders on the LAPD. They probably are going to give him a hard time, so he brings him along with him, and they work together. I mean, you want to make a fun version of this, a TV series. That's what I want. It's a buddy cop movie with the two of them working together, but actually getting to be on the beat together. And frankly, almost everybody else in this movie is dead when it's over. All the thieves are dead. Ellis is dead. I kind of wish the deputy chief was dead, and that dickhead interviewer reporter, he should go. So yeah, I just want a nice happy ending for these characters who went through a bunch of shit and frankly earned it. And that's the epilogue. That's what happens. They get their night. They call him Cowboy throughout the movie, right? He gets to ride off into the sunset. That's what it is.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
And somewhere along the way, let's say that he retires before Al does, and Al decides he witnesses some mob activity in New York, right? So Al gets transferred to Chicago. He changes his name to Carl Winslow.
Oh my god!
And he. Shannon, the important thing is family. Family is what matters, okay?
I think that his character should have invited John McClane to. There's this weird thing going on with these so-called scientists. They've been summoned a giant marshmallow man, and we need to take care of it. Yeah, Reginald Bell Johnson is a national treasure. We're trying to say. Okay, yes. That's going to do it for us for Die Hard tonight. But that's not the end. We are back. We are going to be back tomorrow with an all new After Dark, and I think this is our 2024 wrap up. If I'm correct.
Yeah, so tomorrow is the 2024 wrap up. Last week, obviously, we missed After Dark as well. That was going to be just our Spotify and Apple Music wrap up.
You didn't miss much, trust me.
But since we didn't get to do that then, and we were still waiting to get several other things together, we decided to combine that with what was going to be this week. So it's literally our 2024 wrap up in entertainment. We're going to talk about our favorite movies, our favorite TV shows, our favorite video games,
and of course
the music that we listen to. Yeah, the music that we listened to this year, all of those things. That's all coming tomorrow. Also, later this week, another extra episode of Extras and Epilogues. We're doing our very cagey Christmas, and we're going to jump straight into it with Con Air. We will double back to Raising Arizona and A Christmas Story in a few weeks, but Kaz is coming on. We're talking Con Air. He's going to shoot the bunny. It's a whole thing. That's all happening later this week. After that, again, by the way, as this month rolls on, we are back on track from the sound of things. So we have a bunch of other Christmas movies coming your way. We're talking Krampus. We're talking them up at Christmas Carol. More cagey Christmas, more Nick Cage stuff. We've got National Treasure is on deck. We're going to cover Face Off. Shannon, he takes his face off. And then the several other After Dark specials for the end of the year and the beginning of the new year and all that. But I do also want to mention we had previously hinted over on PZ85 Plays that we were looking at doing a Star Wars holiday special. We were reminiscing about how much we loved our Star Wars Dawn of Defiance campaign. And we said, what if we did a holiday special? And on the original calendar we produced, that was going to be 3 weeks. It was this week, next week, and the week after, all the way up to Christmas Eve. Again, plans change, things happen, and what I recently pitched, what the plan is right now is when you do a tabletop game that is essentially a one-time deal, you call it a one-shot, and usually you do that at literally one time at the table, and that's it. Sometimes when we do a one-shot on this show, it takes like 4 or 5 episodes. That's not happening here. We're going to do, for the first time ever, a real legitimate one-shot. So next Tuesday, the 17th, we are doing the Star Wars holiday special. It's going to be bonkers. It's going to be a lot of fun. We haven't played with these characters in a couple of years now, which is crazy to me.
I'm excited.
So you're going to get to revisit your favorites. Harani Tar is back. Iris Ney is back. Graz is back. Everyone is coming back.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this. Yeah.
Yes. That's happening on the 17th. That's our little Christmas special to you. We're going to get it out well before Christmas Eve so you can listen when you're on the way to family or whatever you're doing.
Or doing drugs or whatever it is you do.
Well, you could do that with the family too, I guess. If you want.
In some families, you have to get through it.
Yeah.
That's coming up tomorrow. Though we have a new After Dark. Until then, the theater is closed, my friends. Thank you for turning in. We're glad to be back. Thank you, Hunter, for being here, of course. And we will see you tomorrow for an all new After Dark as we recap 2023 and 2024. God damn you, old Smokey. Until then, Hunter, take us out.
Hey, asshole, I'm not the one who just got butt fucked on national TV. Now, you listen to me, you jerk off. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Quit being part of the fucking problem and put the other guy back on.